My name's Gabs, and today we're looking at A Fond Kiss by Robert Burns. This is from the Love Through the Ages poetry syllabus paper. We're going to look at Robert Burns, who he was, a little bit of the scandalous story surrounding the poem itself. Then we'll read the poem, we'll analyse some literary devices, and we'll dip into some form and structure. Who was Robert Burns? Robert Burns is a legendary Scottish poet, lyricist, and still celebrated as the national poet of Scotland. He was born in Alloway on the 25th of January 1759 and died aged 37. After his death, he became a wellspring of inspiration for liberalism, socialism, and the Scottish diaspora throughout the world. If you look, there are statues of Burns in the most obscure American and Australian towns. He really touched many people's hearts. Throughout his life, he collected and wrote folk songs, one of the most popular being Auld Lang Syne, which is sung across the United Kingdom every New Year's Eve just before the clock strikes midnight. Moving on to a little bit about the poem. So the poem is a Scottish folk song about the first woman Burns fell in love with. She was called Mrs. Agnes MacLeose. It's written in Scottish dialect, which makes it all more musical and authentic, and was originally sent as a letter to Agnes once she and Burns had parted ways. Burns had a fairly committed relationship with Agnes for around 7 years before she returned to live with her husband and moved to Jamaica. Originally, Burns and Agnes, they both thought that eventually they could be together with the death of her husband. Unfortunately, Burns died first. As we read the poem, what feelings come up for you? Think of the themes that are kind of simmering underneath the text. Things that came up for me were love, fate, and loss, so pay attention to those details. A Fond Kiss by Robert Burns. A fond kiss and then we sever. A farewell and then forever. Deep in the heart-wrung tears I'll pledge thee. Warring sighs and groans I'll wage thee. Who shall say that fortune grieves him while the stars of hope she leaves him? Mean a cheerful twinkle lights me, dark despair around benights me. I'll never blame my partial fancy, nothing could resist my Nancy, but to see her was to love her, love but her and love forever. Had we never loved so kindly, had we never loved so blindly, never met or never parted, we had never been broken-hearted. Fare thee well, thou first and fairest, fare thee well, thou best and dearest. Thine be ilka joy and treasure, peace, enjoyment, love and pleasure. A fond kiss and then we sever. A farewell, alas forever. Deep in heart-wrung tears I'll pledge thee, warring sighs and groans I'll wage thee. So just imagine what it would be like to be in love with someone, close with someone for 7 years, and then all of a sudden, they're severed from your life. He's really channeling all these confused feelings of frustration, anger, love, longing. All these emotions are kind of all bubbling up in this pot of his experience. So firstly, I just want to translate some of the words. A simply means a, or only one. He captures the drama and finality of their separation, which is kind of a lovely segue into the first metaphor. Sever is to cut something by force and has connotations of pain and suffering, as though the blade for cutting has left an open wound. There's imagery, heart-wrung tears. So much pain in this line, as if he feels someone has taken out of his heart and wrung it out tightly like a cloth. It just conveys his pain. We have some alliteration, fond, farewell, forever. The repeated F sound strengthens the intensity and finality of their love and their last goodbye. Onomatopoeia comes up in the line sighs and groans. Burns vocalizes his suffering physically through sound, and it brings the reader closer to his pain and demonstrates the conflict Burns feels at ending the relationship. Look at the word fortune. This is personification. He capitalizes fortune to elevate its importance. After all, why should he grieve? He should feel the luckiest man alive for having even known Agnes. And we can go even further with the metaphor, the star of hope she leaves him, which means she has shown the speaker, Robert Burns, his own capacity for love and happiness. A second interpretation sidles into classics and mythology, for the Roman goddess Fortuna was the goddess of fate, prosperity, and fertility. And we'll return back to the idea of fate later in the poem. Lastly, in stanza 1, we have some more alliteration, and that's in the words dark despair. There's a dark despair inside of him that can't be ameliorated by the twinkle of light. The repetition of the harsh D sound captures his grief and loss at her leaving. There's just a point I want to make about alliteration. There's many examples of it here, but when you're in the exam, it's better for you to show a variety of literary devices rather than constantly picking out alliteration. So just choose your favourite or most enriched example of alliteration from the poem and just focus on alliteration once. Try and just show your variety of being able to identify the different literary devices, and you're bound to gain more marks. There's an epitome. Burns states that even though he's in pain, he will never blame his own passion because Agnes was so beautiful, there was no way to resist her. Even when he laid his eyes upon her for the first time, it was love at first sight. So this word never repeats, and it's spoken with such passion and certainty. There's a sense of devout worship towards his lover. Its repetition invites the reader to reflect on the importance of the word and the emotions that this true love invokes. So epitome is the repetition of a specific word or phrase, and it's important because the reader is trying to get us to reflect on this word repeatedly. Now, anaphora is a repetitive literary device again, but it's slightly different. It's the repetition of a phrase at the beginning of a sentence. In this case, the lines, "Had we never loved so kindly." This is where Burns begins to question love and fate. And that's when we're bringing in the goddess Fortuna again, how she's related to fate. Burns is asking, are lovers fated to be lovers? Are lovers who get separated by unforeseen circumstances never supposed to have met? All these questions are circling in his mind, and this is a big life question. Are we fated to be with only one person for our lives? With this last few lines, there seems to be two interpretations. I'm wondering if Burns is saying, if we had never met, we would never have broken one another's hearts. But I have this other feeling that he's actually saying, if there was a parallel world where we existed but never met and never loved kindly, blindly, there would still be, in some part of Burns, that would be heartbroken because he would have the feeling that there was supposed to be someone that he fell so madly in love with. It's as though he fiercely believes that through all the pain, Agnes and Burns were fated to have this fleeting relationship. Anaphora, fairly well, is repeated again to stress the significance of their parting. Fairly simple. Alliteration, first and fairest, suggests Agnes was the first woman he ever loved and the most beautiful. Notice there are several exclamation points in this stanza 3 because the poem is coming to a climax and it makes the intensity of their goodbye more urgent. The line, thine be ilka joy and treasure, peace, enjoyment, love and pleasure, could be interpreted two different ways. Firstly, he might be cherishing all the beautiful qualities that Agnes brought into his life. Or he might be looking to her future, wishing her all the joy, love and pleasure because it will bring him joy if she leaves and if she lives a happy life. Despite their parting, he still wishes that happy life for her, which means a lot, right? The listing emphasizes the abundant rapture Agnes has brought him and passionately evokes the joy he wishes for her too. Lastly, we have the refrain. Clearly, Burns has not come to terms with the loss of Agnes by the end of the poem, and this is implied because the first lines of the poem repeat, creating a circular lyric. This circular ending offers no closure for Burns, but at least he experiences such a deep and profound love, because for some people, well, they aren't so lucky. Now to form and structure. It's fairly simple. It's a 3-stanza poem with 8 lines, or the fancy word octaves, per stanza. Each octave has rhyming couplets, which is typical of poems that deal with themes such as love. Rhyming couplets come in pairs, like lovers. They sound whole, consistent, and satisfying to the ear. In this case, the couplets convey Burns's dedication and admiration for his lover. However, there are only 3 stanzas, and 3 is an odd number. It's not in a pair. It's jarring and resembles the obstacles that prevent Agnes and Burns's love from being fated. Guys, that's it. That's the poem in a nutshell. So please like, subscribe, and comment your favourite part below. Make sure, if you want to get your hands on some extra notes, you head to my Patreon and come and say hi on Instagram. I think that's everything, so thanks again for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.